Hey, it's Zach, and I'm back with another episode of Elevate and Accelerate. And today I'm hanging out with a really cool friend of mine, Kenny Lange. He is well known for helping nonprofits turn purpose into performance. And so I'm really excited to talk with him about all sorts of things, scaling, leadership, and really diving into more of his story. So Kenny, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Zach. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we talked before and we've kind of gone back and forth about some of the things that you do. And I know faith is a big part of what you do and how you help people. But I would love to start by just kind of finding out a little bit more about, how you got to this place. You mentioned earlier that you were born in Japan. So kind of let me in on a little bit of your story and how you got here.
Yeah, I'll do it as briefly as I possibly can, without my wife making fun of me for being long-winded. But yeah, I was born on a military base on Pearl Harbor Day, so I think it looked great for being born in 1941. Just kidding.
Yeah, great job.
It's a skincare regimen that
tell
I'm
us
here
your
to talk
secrets,
about.
yeah.
But my parents divorced when I was very, very young. So I've never met my biological father. My mom remarried, and the guy she remarried adopted me. So adoption's been a part of my story. I grew up very well, probably strong-willed is the most positive version of how I would describe myself. But my dad is an entrepreneur, and so I just grew up around that. I started selling like lunches at school for money and Pokemon cards and stuff like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, like you could have something and tell somebody it's worth this much and they'll give you money. And so, I'm making a few bucks before lunch every day when I'm in middle school. Eventually, I thought I was going to go into full-time ministry at some point. Now, I've worked in ministry in one way, shape, or form for going on 21 years. But it's never been full-time. And in college, got degrees in psychology, speech communication, which really just means I can talk about how crazy I am. But all of it just, I got into sales and then management and then sales management. And I kept bopping along, but never really finding that thing that felt like home. Eventually, out of necessity, because, I got married, we had 3 kids in the first 4 years. And kids like to eat. It's selfishness is what it is. And I found myself in a really tough place where I had always jumped from the next job to the next job to the next job. And I'd planned it out, and it was always like sort of a stair step up, right? That's what you want when in your career. Well, I took a job in insurance. My dad happened to be working there, and it was the first time I ever really took a job almost purely based on money, like the opportunity to make more than I was making, instead of, hey, this seems like this would be really cool, can make a decent living, or I think I could really help people from this place. I left a job as a admissions recruiter for a university, and so I really felt like, hey, I'm helping the young people, which makes me sound 90, but the young people make that transition, find the right major they're calling their path, and that always felt like it had a great intrinsic reward, even if it didn't compensate you as well as maybe you think it should have. Insurance felt like sitting in a tub full of scissors, and and there was
Miserable.
there was no secret between me and the management that I was trying. I could sell. I had a track record of selling, but this was just way different, and I couldn't connect with it. And it was during that time I really fell in love with leadership development. I had a long commute. I was in the car a lot, and I started listening to leadership podcasts like Entree Leadership and from Ramsey Solutions. And Michael Hyatt had a podcast. He's had like 47 of them now, but I would listen to his, and I was like pausing and taking notes and remembering stuff. And then I started sharing it with people at work, to where every Tuesday I was emailing like 10 people in the company, hey, here's a little leadership thing. And then people outside of work were interested. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll start an email list, and found MailChimp and did that. And then I was packing too much into it. I was like, well, I need a website. And I built a website, and then just kept growing from there. And eventually I got let go of the insurance company, because they're like, hey, like I love the leadership stuff, but it seems like that gets way more of your attention than selling property and casualty insurance. And I was like, if you listen to that sentence, you'll understand why. And so they let me go, and they were very gracious about it. And so I was like, you know what? I want to get into the agency world. I want to get into marketing. That's where it is. And I found an agency. They were more traditional. I worked there 3 months. They let me go. So after more than a decade of just, I got this plan. I'm stair stepping. I'm rocking it. I'm just finding my groove, and all these things. And I found myself fired twice in 4 months, which does not feel good. Is not helpful for the ego, and doesn't look great on social media. And so it's at that point I was like, well, I like doing this sort of stuff. I have a better than average aptitude for it. I'm going to start building websites for people. And then I found HubSpot and became a HubSpot partner and selling marketing. And 5 years go by, and I have an agency, but that I've decided to sell. And then, and we scaled up. I mean, we went from 0 to 6 figures in 3 years, and I was in my late 20s. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to practice all those things I was emailing people about, right? I was like, these all sound great, but they're mostly unproven under my own leadership. And, I screwed up a whole bunch. So if any of them are listening, I'm sorry. But I also think I got a lot right. And it taught me a lot about what I'm made of, what I'm capable of, what I need to let go of. Right. Like you have, it's elevate and accelerate is like, it's hard to elevate if you're hanging on with a death grip to everything. And that was really tough for me because I'm a control freak. I'm a recovering control freak. But I helped that acquiring agency. We went from high 6 figures to low 7 figures in 2 years while I was there. And went from one state, one office locally. And this was through the pandemic. So some of it was forced remote work, but we ended up expanding into 6 states and 4 countries by the time I left. And I saw and it was mostly through implementing frameworks. It was building on what I knew, but I started acquiring this new knowledge of holistic frameworks that really could marry the systems you need in an organization, but the soul, the culture, the people, the leadership, the values. Like you don't have to be like being high performance doesn't mean you put people last, and putting people first doesn't mean you got to settle for mediocrity. It's a both and. And when I saw that, I was like, that's really what I want to do. And I cared more about that than anybody else's website. And, during that time, my wife and I became foster parents. And to date, we fostered 18 kids over about 6 years. We've adopted 2 of them in addition to those 3 biological. And there's a level of impact that we want to have on the foster adoptive community that we're going to need to build a lot more wealth in order to give it away, to invest it, to help people. And that meant going out on our own. So sort of a combination of goals plus just passion and energy that led us to start Kenny Lange Coaching, which as of this recording, we're a week away from being 2 years old. And it's just been it's stressful at times, as you know, but it's been such a blessing to just get more time with my family, more control of my schedule again. But I'm getting to work with some really great organizations that help, children in foster care, teens in drug recovery, victims of sex slave trade, in addition to some other agencies, because I still love that space and love those people. So that's what brought me here. And now it just feels really fulfilling.
Yeah. And so now that it seems like you focus really on these purpose-driven businesses, right? Which tend to be a lot of these nonprofits and things like that, right? But I would imagine that the frameworks that you have and the principles that you apply to these things, and I saw like the system and soul framework and some of this stuff is like, so as my question to you is this, like as a leader of an organization, right? What are some of the things that we may not be paying attention to or might be missing that would allow us to accomplish both of those things, right? The system and soul framework. Like, what would that look like?
Yeah. One of my favorite things that we say in the community that my coach shared was organizations have got to create a vision for the organization where everyone can find their role in the story.
Mm.
One of the best things you can give somebody is a clear understanding of how what they do day in and day out, how that matters overall. It connects them to something bigger than themselves. I mean, especially if you start looking at more so with the millennial generation, like that whole be part of something bigger than yourself. I think it's only grown in importance, to be quite honest with you. But I think that that's just part of working with people. Like, that's how we're wired. That's how we're designed. And obviously you mentioned, my faith informs a lot of my approach. Is, I believe that there is something bigger than just what we can, consume with the five senses. So I think that when we look at who are these people who have chosen to give of their time here, you have a choice. And this goes into how I define what a purpose-driven business is. And its purpose is not money, surprise. But really, you get two types of businesses. Ones that want to use their people to build the business, and ones that want to use their business or their organization to build their people. I am for the latter.
Yeah, you had mentioned something to me in an earlier conversation that we had that I thought was really interesting, and it's the kind of juxtaposition between who you are becoming versus what you're doing, right? And so it seems like that can kind of fit in here a little bit too, is like how leaders invest in their people and helping them to become better versions of themselves, rather than just letting them come in and just punch a ticket,
right?
In other words, so.
Yeah. So I mean, to tag in with the question you just asked about what are people overlooking, I mean, beyond just the fact that they're overlooking their people, tactically or practically, I would say your org chart is a immensely undervalued, underutilized tool. And I know somebody is listening saying and going, you mean that flow chart of people and a hierarchy of who's more important than the other person? Like, no, if that's your idea of an org chart, or that's what your organization thinks an org chart is, it's not helpful. I maybe venture so far as to say it's wrong, but really it is a functional forecasting tool of what functions does our enterprise need, whether you're for profit or nonprofit. What do we need functionally over the next 6 to 12 months to reach our goal? And does every seat, every function have these three things: a mission, roles and responsibilities, and KPIs to let us know if we're winning or losing at the individual level? That creates a level of accountability and clarity that most organizations don't have but want. And suddenly it becomes, especially for managers and senior leaders, when they have to have tough conversations with people, it's not me versus you, right? So Zach, you have KPIs. We're having our quarterly conversation. I'm looking at the trend. You're falling behind on half of your key performance indicators. It's not, oh, well, Kenny dislikes Zach, so we're going to pick on Zach, and I'm going to give him the worst assignments and put him on a performance improvement plan. No, it's Zach versus standard. And when we have that, then we can have clear accountability that isn't personally directed, but it also allows me as a leader to know, well, hey, okay, so what is it about these particular KPIs that you don't feel equipped to take on? Because that's the first responsibility, is to help you be successful as a leader. That's my job, right? It's not to peacock and be important. It's to make better decisions faster and support my people. That's about it. And when you do that, then everybody wins in the organization.
And so as you're working with nonprofits in particular and stuff, I mean, I in my experience and limited understanding of nonprofits in general, a lot of times they've got a really good mission. They've got a great story, they've got a great mission, and it's run by the people who just want to be out there and making an impact and helping. But they also have a difficult time then on the other side of actually running a business and raising support and doing all those other kinds of things. Right. And, and that's, it's kind of the joke, I guess you would, of it being a nonprofit. But it's this idea that's like, they have a difficult time driving profits because they're so focused on the mission and the purpose, and not so
Mm-hmm.
much on the business side of things. Do you find that that's true in your experience? And is that kind of what you're helping people to sort of bridge that gap between, what their mission is and then actually being able to run a business to support it?
Yes and yes. I love sharing with people. And as a matter of fact, I just gave a presentation at a conference with one of my clients in San Diego. And our key idea, our key premise is nonprofit is a tax status, not a business strategy. Right? It's as simple as that. And people think, well, we're supposed to do the most good with the least amount of resources. That sounds backwards to me if I've ever heard a statement. So when we think about the purpose and the mission, those are critical. I'm never advocating that people sacrifice that. What I am saying is let's make sure all of your actions align with achieving the purpose. Let's not mistake activity for progress. It's not. If you are doing things that are barely helping the audience you claim to be in existence for and to serve, but really it's more about making you feel good, or you like we're just barely getting by and we're just struggling, and you want to wear that as a badge of honor. I'm not saying there isn't hard work to be done, especially early on. You're no different than any other small business, right? I think there's a statistic that says 60% of nonprofit is very similar to for-profit entities. I think 60% of nonprofits will close their doors in 18 months.
Wow.
Which, if you think about what they're trying to do, they're trying to do good in the world. That should be disheartening at best and depressing at worst for all of us. And so I heard a leader here in my local community in the Tyler area say and she's the CEO of the local like a Goodwill franchise and organization here, is we've got to do well before we do good. And that's what I'm advocating for. And the thing is, when I speak with whether it's associations or groups or even on a podcast, if I ever ask nonprofit professionals at any level of the organization and say, please raise your hand if you got into this work to make the smallest impact possible. Right now, it's tongue firmly planted in cheek when I'm saying that, because nobody ever raises their hand. I'm waiting for the day that somebody does, because I have some questions for them. But nobody did that. So my question is, okay, so why are you taking actions or a lack of actions that map to that sort of mentality? So let's start building towards, how do we get better? How do we reach more people? How do we reach our mission? How do we reach it faster? You got a 10-year target. What would it take to reach it in 5 years? You want to impact 10,000 people, which, like for me and my wife, we have a long-term vision of positively impacting 10,000 kids by the end of 2033, because we believe that kids from hard places deserve to be seen, heard, and know someone's coming to help. Well, if I hold that, but I don't do jack to really reach out to kids, or to in my case help organizations who reach kids scale, then all I've got is a really nice thing that can go on the wall. And that's heartbreaking to me. So that's where I think we've got to change our thinking from nonprofit means poor little me and barely making a dent, but it's a passion project, instead of, no, we mean business. And as a matter of fact, we should be better run than our for-profit brothers and sisters because of the nobility of our mission. I don't believe that there's any nobility in staying small and serving as few people as possible on either side of the profit divide.
So obviously, and kind of retracing a little bit, you were adopted, and so you have a passion in your heart then for impacting the lives of, you said 10,000 kids,
Yes, sir.
which is very ambitious, but I'm sure achievable too. So can you kind of tell me a little bit about how that vision was created, and what you're doing now to kind of work towards that, and and what that looks like? 'Cause I'm just kind of curious as to how you look to accomplish that too.
Yeah. So when we got started in August of 22, We knew vaguely, like I said, that we want to make this impact on foster and adoptive care and community, whether locally or nationally, internationally, whatever it was. It was more of a sense, as a spark of purpose, right? Very similar to any other entrepreneurial venture. We don't know exactly what it's going to be like, but we kind of have this knowing we're going to follow the energy. And so we started out, and I started working, and like, well, who am I really good at serving, and how could I serve them? And also, we got to be able to pay bills. I can't just give all this away for free. We started talking again last year, like after we passed the 1 year mark, because the 1 year mark for anybody is mostly about, can we survive, right? The first 12 to 18 months are a lot about like, let's pass this mile marker. Let's get some cash in. Let's start to figure out, our fit in the marketplace, right? If you look at like the predictable success model, it's called early struggle before you get to fun. So when we started talking more, I was like, okay, well, what do we want to do? What is that impact? Is it a number of kids, which we landed on? Or is it, we want to give, X number of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars away? Okay. We were sort of just doing business to do business, and we didn't have this anchor, which I coach people on, but mine felt very, as a cobbler's kid without shoes. It was the same way with a marketing agency. It's like I could make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for other people, but for whatever reason, my own funnels would not perform as well, or I wouldn't do it the same way, or just forget about it. And as we narrowed in, I kept having this draw to 10,000 kids. It's about, number one, it's about the kids at the end of the day. And number two, I was like, okay, well, how many, like what would feel right? And, there's 500,000 kids in the US in foster care currently.
Wow.
Which for your faith-filled church going listeners, if every church foster adopted one child, we would wipe out the foster care system. Let that sink in. That seems pretty simple. That's a tangent for another day in a different podcast. But I thought, well, what could we do? And the number 10,000 just kept coming back to me. And I told my wife, I think it's 10,000 kids. Now, what is it? A goal without a deadline is a dream or a hallucination, or some quote like that. I was like, okay, well, what about 10 years? So we were at the end of 2023. I said, let's plant a flag. So December 31st, 2033 is when we need to hit this. And I said, now I need to start thinking exponentially. I cannot think in terms of addition. And if you're a fan of Dan Sullivan, who wrote, the Who Not How, I mean, he has like 37,000 small books, and now he's get him and Dr. Hardy, who is also a foster adoptive parent, are writing some of these key principles into full featured books. One of them is 10x is easier than 2x. He's always asking people, how can you
got it right there on the shelf?
There you go. And so what is the 10x model? Craig Rochelle of Life Church, one of the largest churches in America, and wherever you stand on your thoughts or feelings towards that, it's a large, very well run organization. He talks a lot about what's been transformative for them in reaching more people and reaching their mission, is always asking like, okay, what is the 10x version of this? So it has changed my thinking. So one, I'm now changing my marketing, has been somewhat to nonprofits, but it's been strongly towards nonprofits, in particular ones that reach children. So like I mentioned, I've got one that is newer that deals with victims of sex slave trade. I've got one of substance use disorders down in San Antonio. They have San Antonio's only drug recovery high school, which is a model that just blows my mind. I didn't know existed. And so they're doing great work down there, but I don't need to come up with the next model to reach all the kids. What my gifts and talents and abilities are helping organizations scale. And it's not a great sales proposition to say, how are you going to help? Well, just hire me and things will get better and bigger. Like, what does that mean? I don't know, but spend lots of money with me and I'll show you. Like, But wherever I go, the organizations I've ever been a part of, growth occurs. For profit, church, whatever it is, it grows. And I was like, okay, so how do I use my giftings and passions to with theirs? I don't need to be an expert on substance use disorders. I don't need to be an expert on restoration from being a victim of sex slave trade. I don't need to be an expert in all these other things, and I, maybe in foster care just because I do it. But that's what's allowed me to find these places where if they're reaching 100 kids, how could I help them reach 200 kids or 1,000 kids? I accepted a position on a board of a group home for teen girls in foster care, which is called Hope Haven of East Texas, and that's an often overlooked population in the foster care system. So how can I help them not just take care of, 20 girls at a time or do, child placements here and there, but it's just we're overloaded and just constantly in growth mode. So how can I help them grow from a board position? It's changing the way I make decisions and the scale with which I impress, like, let's do this, let's look at this, what are we missing? And a lot of it are just the systems and tools that I have in my toolkit that I talk about in LinkedIn posts and websites. But it really is looking into how can we help them help more people.
Yeah, it's a noble vision, and I love the idea. I think obviously your passion is coming through on this, and this desire to help the people and the organizations that are having the greatest impact have a greater impact. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. And we all know, just even intuitively, a lot of ways, it's like those are the organizations that need the most help. And so it's really cool that you're being able to do that. And so how does somebody engage with you then? I mean, I'm sure you do more than just organizational work. You've got a number of services on your website. So what does that process look like, and how does somebody kind of engage with you at those different levels?
Yeah. So go to the website, Kenny Lange, LANGE.com. It's not Kenny Large, as we were joking about before we recorded. But if you go there, you're going to see a tab that says how I help. And a lot of the things that you've heard me say about the organizational framework, system and soul, there is a page just on that framework. But really, I help organizations grow and thrive in three ways. They focus the organization. A lot of them are, scattered. They're going a millimeter in 1,000 directions instead of a mile in one. Fostering high performance teams. So we'll do work on team composition. Maybe it's the 6 types of working genius. Maybe it's communication with radical candor. Maybe it's leaning into personality types and strengths with the Enneagram, which I could probably do an 8-part mini series just on that off the top of my head because I love it so much. And then the one-on-one or even sometimes one-on-two leadership development called Creating Leaders Worth Following, which is based on Tim Spiker's work by the same name. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. But I work with leaders to become inwardly sound and others focused. And I use a variety of tools and processes to have those conversations, help them unlock their leadership capacity. Or sometimes the founder or CEO just wants to talk to somebody where their words don't weigh 800 pounds. And they didn't have an idea and somebody took it as gospel and ran with it. And you're like, dear God, I was just having a pleasant conversation with you. I didn't give you a direct order to go storm, the beaches. And so sometimes being able to process and through those things and get perspective before bringing it back into the organization can be really helpful. And some of it's like conflict resolution stuff, but those are the 3 big ways. The website has a direct call to action. It's all over. It's just book a discovery call. The other way, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you want to engage with a post or just DM me, I do my very best to respond in a timely manner, unless you are somebody who is spam messaging me about how you can transform my YouTube and social media channels. Those people can cease and desist.
Those come all the time, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And then the final place, if somebody is like, hey, I don't know, but I kind of like what you're saying. How Leaders Think with Kenny Lange is my podcast. And that's a great place to hear from other people that are much smarter than me. but have some great conversations and different perspectives, not just what to do, but how to think. So we're getting away from the guruisms. But those would be the three key ways that I think I can help somebody.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I'm just kind of curious what, obviously we've talked about a number of different things. What would be like your piece of advice? Like what's something that maybe a leader or an organization or somebody who's hearing this, like what is one step that they could take right now, or a couple steps that would help set them on the path of heading in the right direction of, turning their purpose into performance?
So I love this question, mostly because this is almost verbatim the question I ask at the end of my own podcast. So we should talk about
Nice.
that. I look forward to asking you this question if you're a guest on mine and turn the tables.
Yeah.
The one piece of advice, I think at the individual level, gain self-awareness of how you're wired. If you have a faith orientation, how did God design you? And what did he create you for? Because it wasn't to do everything, and that's okay. And whether you use the Enneagram or you use another assessment tool or something like that, those can be great for showing the outline. Could be asking a friend that you really trust to give you candid feedback, and that you're not going to get all defensive and angry at them when they tell you something you need to hear but maybe didn't want to hear. When you do that, your capacity to lead others increases because your capacity to lead yourself has grown. And I think that's where everything, like John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership.
I love that. And I love the Enneagram too. It was, I would say the Enneagram was probably the start of my own sort of journey of self-discovery. And my wife is always like kind of leading the charge on some of those things of like, do this thing, take that test, figure this thing out. So as an Enneagram 7, it's like I've realized a whole lot about of how I operate and how I do things. And I would always say too, it's like someone would just be like, well, why are you doing that? And I'm like, well, it's just for a good story, or I'm looking for an adventure. Like that's always what I'm doing. I'm like, I'm just doing it because I want a cool story or
right.
to be on an adventure. Right.
Yeah. I've gone so far as to put it, and it may have been you that commented, I have it in my email signature. So if anybody wants to know my Enneagram number, shoot me an email, kenny@kennylange.com, and I'll reply, and you'll get to see. I have that, my working genius in there as a little, hey, here's how to interact with me hint.
I love that. So my final question here is just this podcast being about personal branding, elevating your brand to accelerate your journey to success, and how using your story is a big part of how you can grow your business. Be curious, as somebody who has lived that experience, who's had a marketing agency, helped other people do that as well, and now doing it for yourself. How has building a personal brand and sharing your story helped to grow your business and businesses, and help other people to do that too?
Dang. That is a great question. 2 of my best clients came through, actually sort of came through LinkedIn. And I say best in terms of just best alignment with values, interpersonal values, but then also valuing the work that I do. Because I mean, sometimes what I do can help, but it's valued at different levels, and that's fine. But one came because I did share my story on a podcast, and I said, hey, if you're a business owner or founder who wanted to build a path to freedom, but felt like you ended up building your own prison, let's talk, because I can help you get out, because I've been there. And that's what connected us, and probably one of the fastest sales cycles I've ever had in my life. And now we've actually become good friends. And it blew my mind that sharing that story of building my agency, and he's an agency owner as well, that would resonate so deeply with him. And he's like, oh, good. One, I'm not alone. And to be quite honest, I think once I figured out that I can lead with my story, my vulnerability, and the pain, and hold space for other people to be honest about it, the conversations I've found myself in, especially over the last 6 months, I've been a lot more honest. Not that I think I was dishonest, but I think I was trying to promote something, and not something I'm not, but just the most professional version. Maybe I'm overcompensating because, I look like I'm 12, or something else, but it's phenomenal how honest people will be you got to go first. If your goal is to reach out and help more people like you, and as a leader, your job is to go first. I know Simon Sinek says leaders eat last, but and I'm not disagreeing with him, but I do think that there's merits to going first, sharing first, risking first. And the more I lean into that, the more resonance I'm finding professionally with more of the right people. I'm not for everybody. I am for a few people, a group, an audience. And those people will resonate with my story. And those are the people I can help immensely. I can't help everybody that much, but it's taken getting there to that place and sharing that and being honest with myself to really build that. So that's a great question. It's one I've never really thought about. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I really appreciate you jumping on the show today with me and, kind of talking through your story and your journey and how you help people. It's been really great. And obviously, the goal of impacting the lives of 10,000 children is huge. And so any way that we can support anybody that's listening, if you want to support, feel free to reach out, and we'll kind of put up your contact information and everything and put in the description so they can get that. So that's great. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Kenny. Really appreciate it and sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening. As always, if you found this helpful, useful, informative, please like, share, subscribe, all those fun different things, and keep elevating and accelerating. Cheers.